Seeing your child misbehave and think, oh, they must be hurting. I wonder why they're hurting. How can I help my child? That is what we should all be doing. We got to hear from Paige Hanna. Oh my goodness. She has a new YouTube channel. She is not monetized. She has no desire to make any money. She just wants to share her side of the story. She has 3 videos up, one from April and then one I believe from May and then into June. She's not done yet, and so I'm looking forward to future videos, but I'm going to cover to kind of summarize her first 3 really quickly here. I will link to her channel in the description so that you can watch the rest of them, all of them yourself, because they're fascinating and give some really good insights, not only into Ruby and Jodi and how they worked, which is disturbing enough, but also, you know, how cult leaders work, and which then helps us understand Chad Daybell, Tim Ballard, and so many others who've done creepy things. The channel is called Under the Rug, which was also the title of what was supposed to be a YouTube channel that Ruby and Paige were going to do together about parenting, and that blew up and never happened. And so she's using the title to say this is what's under the rug, things that were hidden with Jodi. And Paige's first 3 videos about her involvement in Connexions, Jodi Hildebrandt, and Ruby Franke, and that entire mess. Welcome to True Crime, Faith, and Chocolate. I'm your host, Annette Lyon, USA Today bestselling author of the suspense novel Just One More and a whole bunch of other stuff. I'm also a true crime junkie and a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which unfortunately is the faith of Jodi Hildebrandt and Ruby Franke. Although I suspect they've been excommunicated and they do not represent us at all. No, not remotely. We'll get into some of that. We first heard about Paige when Kevin Franke was being interviewed by the police, and he starts talking about his entrance into Connexions and how he felt it was all cultish, and how Jodi had spent 6 weeks supposedly being held captive at their friend's house. That was Paige's house. 6 weeks. So we'll get into that in just a second here. What happened there? So Paige, it makes sense that Paige didn't want to kind of give her side of the story, because that did sound kind of alarming. A lot of it makes a lot more sense now. So she said that she's going to basically cover roughly a 4-year period from 2017, when she first met Jodi, to May, June 2021, when she abandoned Connexions and everyone and everything to do with it. She just fled, abandoned, walked away from that chaos. What got her first going into looking into any kind of parenting advice, help, whatever, was in 2017. She had her first daughter. Now she has 8 children now. 2017, when this daughter was born, that was child number 6, but daughter number 1. So she had 5 boys, and suddenly she has a daughter, and she said she felt overwhelmed. She's like, I don't know how to mother a girl. She was looking for help on becoming a better mother. At the time, so she has 6 children, and the oldest was 8. That's a lot of little kids. So no wonder she's overwhelmed. She did have some nanny help, and her nannies showed her some worksheets that she had about some therapy type stuff, and apparently she had gotten them from Jodi. And she didn't describe much about them, but she said it was kind of generic therapy, counseling type, good, just generic advice, and may well have been something Jodi got from somebody else. It was that generic, but it was, you know, helpful information. It was good enough information that she thought, oh, well, maybe I'll go attend this parenting class that this Jodi person is putting on. She said that she never had Jodi as a therapist, and no one in her family did either. She went to these parenting classes, and the parenting classes seemed good. She describes the underlying concepts that Jodi was teaching, and this is what I find so fascinating. I can't be in Jodi's head, obviously. I don't know. She seems incredibly messed up and disturbed. And yet, the way Paige was interpreting the teachings, the underlying basis, the way she interpreted it, I thought that actually does sound healthy and good and Christ-like, until Jodi starts to twist things around. The idea, as Paige describes it, is that you're either in a state and she's disavowed much of this, but the underlying concept and why she was drawn to it is that you're either a state of peace, that is what the ideal, that's what you're going for. And if you are not in a state of peace, then you're in a state of pain. And so she said that the idea was that if you see someone, a child who is disobeying or acting out or being angry, whatever it is, you can say, oh, they must be in pain. And then you can have your compassion and say, how can I help my child? Clearly they're in pain. What is causing this pain? Let me see if I can help them resolve their problem. That sounds like a very good thing, right? That sounds very Christ-like, actually. Like, oh, and having compassion instead of saying, oh, this person's just being a brat. It's, oh, they're hurting. How can I help them to heal? How can I help them to know that they are loved? Showing a compassionate side rather than a judgmental one. And that sounds like a very positive thing. But just as like Chad and Lori Daybell decided to take things and twist them that came from maybe a good root, and then they took it off somewhere else, that's kind of what it sounds like that Jodi did here. So peace and pain turned into truth and distortion. We've heard those a lot, right? When Paige says truth and distortion, she kind of flinches. She just like, it just is almost triggering because to her, those words became so incredibly negative. But for her, the underlying concept was love and kindness. That was the foundation, just seeing someone else's experience and realizing, oh my goodness, they're in pain. They have suffered something. And then also to slow down as you go through your day and go, oh, why did I just get angry at that? Maybe, oh, I just realized that upset me and I'm in pain because of this. Okay, therefore I won't lash out because I understand why I got upset and now I can act differently. So it was a positive thing even for her. She talked about another concept that Jodi had taught, and again, this is on its surface, it sounds like a good thing. That again, the goal is to have peace, and then if you it's almost like a seesaw where you want to stay in the middle, but if you're falling to one side or the other, either you're putting yourself as either adulation or denigration of yourself. So either you're prideful or you're putting yourself down. So either I'm better than others or I'm not good enough. And the ideal would be I am enough as I am. Not that I'm better or worse, but I'm enough. Clearly, Jodi doesn't believe in peace because she thought she was better than everybody else, and also in some ways thought she was worse because she was never enough, apparently. The goal was to be enough and at peace. So far, so good, right? But then Jodi would throw in things like, oh, we need to bring in 12-step program type things, only twisted into our own versions, because everybody's addicted to something. If you're in distortion, you're addicted to something, whether it's procrastination or whatever. And that's when Paige said things started to feel off. Like there was always this sense of judgment. She was talking to Ruby about this woman who was just kind of struggling to get her dishes done every day. And Ruby's like, well, she's just in distortion. She's just addicted to procrastination and being lazy. And Paige said, well, what if there's something else connected? Maybe being by the sink was a place she was always yelled at, or there was some kind of abuse to her that happened in her past. And so she's looking for a source of pain that would explain her putting off doing her dishes. And at the time, then Ruby said, well, I've never heard Jodi say something like that. And then Paige thought, well, since when is Jodi the god of all? Why? She's not the only all-knowing whatever. So that's in the future, but we're on the timeline here. But that was kind of the vibe of Paige going, wait, that's not in line with what you were supposed to be living, and that's some of the principles you were teaching. But she said that it's very easy to say this is a one good thing here. So obsessed with it because it is helping my children and it's helping me. And then she goes, that good thing became my God, is the way she put it. And she said that it's the threat. When you have your own higher power, your God, whatever you call it, and you allow another person and something that they're teaching to override that is a problem. And that's where the cult mentality comes in. And she said it doesn't take someone with a low IQ to be taken in by a cult leader. All it takes is a person wanting to do good and become a better person, and then being vulnerable to someone who comes in to that person to manipulate them. And so it's very easy to be, okay, well, this person's helping me be better, and look, they've helped me this far, and then just get swept away into anything they say must be right. And she goes into a little bit about what it means to be a cult leader. There's one person at the top that calls all the shots. You can't question them. Their teachings and their own actions don't line up. But they're the exception to their own teachings, which I find fascinating. Didn't sit well with Paige. Latter-day Saint teachings kind of fall in line with that too, because yes, we have a prophet, but major changes don't happen unless the prophet, his 2 counselors, so we have a first presidency made up of 3 men, and then 12 apostles. All 15 of them have to be in agreement before big stuff changes. And good luck getting 15 people to agree on something. It takes, that's why things change so slowly. There isn't just one person at the head, and they're all expected to keep the same standards as everybody else. I think that something in the back of her head was like, yeah, something is off here. They kept thinking the underlying principles seem to be good, and so maybe if we can teach other coaches, and then they can go out and then we can kind of shove Jodi off to the side a little bit so her toxicity can't hurt other people, that could still be a good thing. So she and her husband actually got into the board of Connexions. They were never paid a penny. It was all volunteer. But they were trying to build up this business for Jodi because if they believed in the ability of the principles as they knew them to help people. Jodi would give them guilt trips constantly of dropping things of, oh, things are so hard and I just don't have enough help with this. And she would never actually ask for help. She would just express a need and how, oh, this thing isn't happening. And then that would guilt trip them into be offering to fix the thing. And Paige she got kind of tearful in her videos. I think this is video number 2 or 3, I'm forgetting now, about how she still gets upset thinking about how much time that she gave to Jodi. This is actually something that I think that Latter-day Saint culture and possibly Christian culture in general is vulnerable to, and I have issue with. Hey, me and my opinion. Yeah, people just they don't want to ask because that could be rude, but then they hint and they guilt trip and then they manipulate to get what they want instead. Not cool. Saying, oh yeah, it's like, oh, my car's in the shop and I have no way to get to the store. Oh, you're going to the store? Oh, that must be nice. I can't get to the store. I need to go to the store. It's that kind of thing. And so then it's like, oh, you're the fishing for offers of help. But that's what Jodi would do. Only it came down to taking advantage of her employees, her volunteers. She played the victim. Others came to the rescue. People gave her time, gave her money. She would state a problem and just let it hang in the air. Paige and her husband would just jump in to help. They were always felt to be blamed of being selfish, that they weren't doing more. Paige started seeing Jodi as becoming really harsh and unkind, and she's like, this just doesn't feel right. Jodi would just be like, oh, well, they're just in distortion. And Paige would be like, well, then where's the compassion? Because isn't that supposed to mean that they're in pain? Aren't we supposed to reach out and help them through their pain? Like, what happened to the compassion? Yeah, not great. So a year in to this whole Connexions debacle, Paige meets Ruby. At this point, Ruby already has her YouTube channel. Ruby tells Paige that she's struggling with parenthood and she wants to be more patient and compassionate. And I get the impression Paige hadn't really watched the videos. She didn't really know what Ruby was doing on her channel. A lot of disturbing things have come out, of course, since, even though the channel's deleted. Most of us who followed anything on it know about how, like, her kindergartner daughter was expected to wake herself up in the morning and make her own lunch, and if she didn't, then she'd just have to go hungry. Her teen son didn't have a bed or a bedroom. Those are the minor ones. There were a whole lot more of other stuff, of food as a weapon, all kinds of bizarre, really harsh things. That, yeah, it's the really disturbing, way before Jodi entered the picture. So I think Paige got the impression that, like, oh, well, Ruby really wants to be more compassionate and have more patience. That's probably a good thing. Even if she didn't know what was in the videos, but she got the impression that Ruby recognized a problem. And Paige thought, well, you know, if she needs more compassion and more patience, maybe this understanding the idea of pain and peace would be helpful. Maybe Connexions would be useful because it was for her, right? Except that it obviously didn't work out that way. So Paige goes on to talk about how she was fascinated with the idea of how generational trauma can manifest, how healing generational trauma can bring you and your family more into a state of peace more. So she wanted to go on a family history trip, and the Frankes came along, and that's when they kind of really bonded, these two couples. And that's when she starts introducing the concepts of pain and peace and whatnot to Ruby. It was on that trip, and Kevin Franke talks about it in his interview with the police, how he thought that Connexions was a cult already. And Ruby and Paige kind of laughed at that. Paige said in hindsight she should have listened. Already online, like Yelp reviews of Connexions were calling it a cult. And she just thought, oh, people are just overreacting, whatever, they don't understand. And she goes, actually, I didn't understand. And that was upsetting. When Ruby got involved with Connexions, instead of finding patience and compassion, her children were clearly in pain, but she learned from Jodi, Ruby did, to have even less patience and compassion. That it was almost like putting the two of them together was adding a match to gasoline, is the impression I got. I don't know if she used those words. She reiterated the stuff about cults. Not only is there just the one person at the top who is the exception to their own teachings, no one can question them, but the followers seek that person's approval. And then you do all kinds of things trying to get their approval, because their approval means everything. Now, she talked about specifically how Jodi is a cult leader, how she was exempt from her own teachings. She was teaching parenting classes and marriage classes, but she was divorced at least once. Rumor says twice. I'm not sure exactly on the numbers. It was implied that the divorce wasn't her fault. She was a victim in it. Nobody in those classes knew for years that her children had no relationship with her. They'd got no contact. She kind of kept that to herself for obvious reasons. She was a licensed therapist. She had degrees. People thought, oh, well, I can't question her qualifications. She must know what she's talking about. Paige also says how she would tell partial truths. She'd say something and kind of just leave it hanging in the air so that you would infer things that weren't necessarily true, and then she wouldn't correct your misunderstanding because she wanted you to think a thing. For example, there'd be a story about a child getting upset about something, and the way she would frame the story and then trail off would be that you wouldn't say, oh, well, that child must be a brat, and because she's in distortion. Instead of going with some sort of compassion, being like, oh, maybe this child did this, that, and the other because she's in pain because of this or whatever. And then taking advantage of her employees again, and always telling half-truths about, oh, well, this person's mad at me because of this, or this person did this. And you're like, did they though? I think it was somewhere in 2018, 2019 when Jodi began confiding into Paige about scary nightmares that she was having. Paige said that she was way over her head. She did not have the qualifications to help Jodi, but she's somewhat flattered, I guess, that Jodi would trust her with this information. But she did say it was a little odd, again, another red flag that she kind of sailed by, at least at first, that the nightmares weren't just, oh, scary evil. It was Satan himself. So not just evil, bad people or spirits or whatever, but the father of evil himself. That, that Jodi must be so important that the absolute head honcho of evil has to be the one after her. Because she's almost like a god called to teach the world about her Connexions ideas and to save people, almost like a messiah figure, again, cult leader, absolutely, which is really narcissistic and disturbing. Late 2020 is when Paige and Ruby decide to think they're going to launch a parenting channel. At the beginning of January 2021 was the original idea. And Paige said that she hoped that having a channel together would be an avenue for Ruby to perhaps learn the compassion that she says that she wants, because she had already seen that Ruby was not being compassionate or patient with her children, but actually just making their pain worse. Some of the things that I've seen since, I'm like, oh my gosh, you are a horrific person. It really seems like Ruby absolutely used anything Jodi taught as a weapon and made things worse for her kids and justified it with Jodi's twists. It just breaks my heart because, yeah, the idea of seeing your child misbehave and think, oh, they must be hurting. I wonder why they're hurting. How can I help my child? That is what we should all be doing. And yet Jodi and Ruby took and twisted, oh, they're in distortion. They're being a brat. They're addicted to laziness. Holy crap. Paige described the lack of compassion and absolute judgment that Jodi and Ruby would put on others. It was almost like seeing someone who had fallen into a hole, and instead of saying, I will lower a ladder and down into the hole and help you out, it was, you're in a hole. You got yourself there. Clearly you don't want to get out. You're a bad person because you're in a hole. And that is like, that doesn't sound like how's that helpful, compassionate, or peaceful, or productive in any way? All that is judgmental and mean. So Ruby would use these ideas to say, well, see, this thing you're doing, that is evidence that you're evil, and is why you're miserable. Because you're evil and addicted to this lying, or this deceit, or this whatever. And Paige, it was so disturbed. She said, the kids just need to be loved and comforted. But Ruby made her children afraid of her and felt that they weren't worthy of being loved. They weren't loved. Their actions had to be perfect in order to be acceptable, and then therefore loved. So the more she talked about, poor Ruby's kids just fearing her. And frankly, I think Kevin is somewhat culpable on this, that he present during a lot of the early videos, and people had said that, but the more videos I've seen and realizing that he knew the kinds of punishments she was doing, and like withholding food and all kinds of scary threats and name calling, he knew some of this and did nothing to stop it. He was an absolute doormat. Okay, whatever, honey. I hope he does not get custody. I really hope he doesn't. The idea that Ruby ruled her house on fear, I was trying to go, okay, who's the Prince of Peace? Yeah. The author of Fear, I believe, is the other side. In 2021, that's when things started to fall apart. Apparently a coach graduation event. It sounds like it was either in Springville or at Paige's house or somewhere nearby. She kind of laughed. She goes, if you were there, you know what a disaster it was, or what a joke it was, and how it was very clear that Jodi does not know how to, just doesn't have business sense. Jodi drove home, and then the nightmare began. So Jodi, of course, lived in Santa Clara, which is down by St. George, right at the border on the southwest end of Utah. We get a phone call from one of Jodi's friends who lives abroad. She didn't name this person, but Jodi was also on the call and said that Jodi is not doing well and she needs help. And then Paige said, we didn't know what that meant. She's not doing well. What does that even mean? But it sounded like she was in a very bad state. So they said, well, how about you come to our house? We'll drive down and pick you up. And she goes, oh, I couldn't put you out. I couldn't do that. I can't. But I'm suicidal. But I can't put you out. Like that. I can't impose. I'll just kill myself peacefully down here. So Paige and her husband finally they said, okay, we'll drive halfway and we'll meet you there. And if you decide not to meet us there, then you will have just made us drive hours tonight, round trip, for nothing. And well, okay, if you insist. So that's what they did. She ends up at their house, and Paige thought it would be a brief stepping stone into professional help to get past an initial crisis. But no, Jodi refuses professional help. She refuses medication, even though she admits to some serious diagnoses from the past. Possibly schizophrenia. I've heard that from a couple of sources. Paige thinks that may have been one of them, as well as a dissociative identity disorder, also known and previously as multiple personalities. Borderline personality disorder. That one for sure rings a bell I'm not a psychologist, but from what I've seen and read, that one at least seems very likely. As well as schizophrenia, if she's having voices in her head, which she says she is. But she refused to get professional help because the doctors are in distortion and won't let her live her truth. They will force her to take medication, which will then numb her, turn her into a zombie, which, now coming off of the Daybell case, that word is charged, but, and that she wouldn't be able to live her truth and live honestly and with integrity if she's on medication. That will then lead her to take her own life anyway. Everything was a threat that if you try to take me to see a doctor, then eventually ... I will end up taking my life. She gives her car keys to Paige, tells her to lock the doors, to keep the keys, don't let her have them, and threatens her. If you give me my car keys, I will drive out and onto the freeway, get into an accident, and kill myself and maybe somebody else in the process. Everything she said was a threat. So, did she take away Jodi's car keys? Yeah. Did she lock her in the house? Yeah. Because she was threatened, if you don't do this, my death will be on your hands. And yet she told people later that she kidnapped me and held me and I couldn't get out. And she's like, okay, yeah, sort of, but not because I wanted to, because you were threatening to take your life. She was there for 6 weeks. Those were the 6 weeks that Jodi was at her house. And she said that, had she not had her husband and a support system, if they had ever been a client of Jodi's, fortunately they hadn't been, they might have fallen apart too, like the Frankes did. But fortunately, they survived the constant threats of her taking her own life, of watching her self-harm, binge, starve herself, hearing the voices, the constant nightmares, and on and on. Eventually, Paige came up with the idea of bringing her, Jodi, to a kind of therapist. Apparently, she uses various modalities, possibly some kind of energy work in there. Not the classic Western medicine, I guess, that Jodi was so opposed to. So Jodi was like, okay, fine, I can do that. Because the idea was that this particular practitioner could help you figure out the cause of your pain so you could then heal it, which kind of felt, it was like you could massage that into how Jodi taught things. She got Jodi to agree to go there, and Jodi asked Paige to be present. So Paige would attend these sessions. She is then hearing Jodi describing situations in ways that Paige knows firsthand are false, or she's omitting serious chunks, details, information. She's denying all kinds of stuff. She's manipulating the story and the therapist. She sees herself as a victim constantly. She's rationalizing crap. And it's just like a laundry list of everything Jodi preached against, saying that if you're doing any of these things, you're in distortion. And Paige is going, check, 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 check. There's a whole list of them, like 20 of them. And she's like, Jodi was doing all of them. It made her go, oh, okay, so Jodi is off her rocker based on Jodi's own teachings. So yeah, the absolute hypocrisy of suppressing her own truth and reality, refusing to look inward so she could see maybe what is the cause of her pain, what is the cause of any trauma, and then make any actual changes toward healing. So the one place that Paige really lost me, though, is that, and this is just, I guess, my own lack of compassion, perhaps, but she said that many of Jodi's dreams weren't specifically nightmares. They were horrific actual memories. And then she said that, learning about the traumas that Jodi had been through made her have so much compassion and realize that, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that type of trauma existed in this world, that kind of evil existed in this world. And then, oh wow, that explains Jodi, because think how much pain she must be in. And yes, hurt people. I get that. And yet, once you're an adult, it doesn't fly. You don't get to do the crap that Jodi did. The absolute destruction of so many people's lives. Not only was it the Franke family and those poor little children, but it was her own niece, and it was her own children, and it was how many other families. If you're going to destroy your own life, you do you, lady. But she was actively destroying hundreds of lives. I don't think we'll ever know the exact number. I'm sorry, I don't have a lot of compassion. If you're in pain, and you're actively trying to find a way to fix it and you're not actively hurting other people, then I can have some compassion. But you refuse to change, you refuse to look at yourself and recognize where you've gone wrong, and you're actively hurting others. Yeah, my compassion runs dry there. I struggle. Paige shed some tears at that point, and I'm just mad at Jodi because she's hurting literally innocent lives. Like these poor, sweet little innocent children. Like, I don't care what trauma she experienced as a child if she's taking it out on all kinds of other people. You deal with your own crap. I'm sure she had trauma, no question. That does not justify what she's doing and what she has done. That, not even. One really piece of good news though that we've got, this was not through Paige's videos, but through Jessica Danielle. I can link to her as well in the description. She did some records requests and discovered that, hallelujah, the process, so she could take forever, but it's finally done, that Utah has revoked Jodi's license to be a therapist permanently. It is official. Boom, done, and she can't get it back. Hallelujah. I mean, she was taken temporarily at one point and then reinstated, and we know how that went. At least there's that. Not that she won't try to find her groupies and her little followers, cult things in prison, most likely, but she can't, if and when she gets out, she can't do this kind of thing under the guise of being a licensed therapist ever again. I do worry about the whole life coach thing, but because Utah has most states have very lax laws on what it means to be a life coach, which is why anybody can just put out a shingle and say they're a life coach and get clients and bilk them. I get the impression that this case is leading to some changes legally in Utah. A life coach thing, that it's going to require more stringent regulation, but also on the sentences of this type of crime, because they were given the maximum allowed by law, but it wasn't much, as you may know. They could be in prison for, I think, up to 35 years, but they could also be in prison as little as like 4 or 5, if I recall correctly. So a law needs to change so that the judge could have given more. So the judge gave as much as was allowed under the current statute. That's the latest updates that I have. I was so grateful to hear from Paige just to get some of her side of the story. She really does seem like a kind person with good intent, and that when things blew up, she was like, peace, I'm out. I'm no way. You guys are bad. This is not good. I will not be part of this. Once she had her eyes opened. Her story's not done. We have our 3 videos, and that's as far as we got, is those 6 weeks of when Jodi was living at her house. And I am eager to find out what happened next. How did things blow up so horrifically in 2021, May to June? So stay tuned for that, because I know I'm eager, and I will probably be like watching those videos with, what kind of chocolate should we do? I'll be watching those ones with chocolate pudding. Ooh, chocolate mousse. Maybe we'll do that. So drop some chocolate emojis in the comments. Let me know what kind of chocolate you'll be downing. And before you leave, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and click that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. And until next time, go grab yourself something sweet.